Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be discussing the start of my German study in conjunction with the 40-hour 7-day language challenge. So what is this challenge? I first became aware of this sort of challenge through Days of French and Swedish on their Instagram, and on his story he just said that he was going to be studying kind of full-time for a week and track his progress and see how it went. And then I saw Seabolt Speaks video on this particular challenge, so 40 hours over 7 days. And on his video he mentioned the creator of the challenge, Langauge, come up. So the challenge is pretty self-explanatory. It's 40 hours over 7 days, and as I understand it, it's pretty flexible. So obviously you need to cater it towards your target language, your language goals, and your current level. So anything goes, as far as I'm aware. So why German? Let's give you a bit of background first. In 2017, I was attending a language exchange in London. It was a Korean language exchange, and I met a German friend there, and she was going home for the Easter to visit family, and she very kindly invited me and a couple of other friends to stay with her and her family. And yeah, as somebody who likes learning languages, I wanted to at least learn some basic phrases and pleasantries, thank you, goodbye, hello, all that kind of stuff. So what I did is, well, just a disclaimer, I have technically studied some German before, and that's what I'm going to be explaining. I googled language apps and came across Duolingo for the first time, and for those 2 weeks I did probably 15 to 20 minutes per day, kept a streak going, and yeah, picked up the basics. So technically I have studied, but I guess you can take that as you will for this language challenge. I really enjoyed my time in Germany, and if you ever watch this, thank you, Nell. I am eternally grateful to you and your family. Amazing time. But that aside, I was really tempted to study German at that point in time. But I also wanted to focus on my Korean. I didn't want to spread myself too thin, so I decided to put it on the back burner, at least for the meantime. And things happened. I ended up carrying on with Korean for a little bit. I then ended up recently picking up Swedish, and I've just always really intended to. It's kind of been on my to-do list for a long time, but now seems like the perfect time to actually get my teeth into it and give it a proper go. As the parameters of the challenge are 40 hours over 7 days, I decided I wanted to properly track my progress. I've been using an app called a tracker, and it's essentially just a stopwatch which you can have assignable labels and color codes. And what you do is, obviously, when you start the study, press play. Whenever you decide to take a break or stop, press the stop button, and it automatically transfers that data and updates your graphs and charts, and basically means you can have a proper breakdown of exactly what you've studied and when. So this has obvious utility when it comes to this language specifically, but also I just love to track statistics with my language learning anyway, so vocabulary count, hour study, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, the main reason I'm doing this is for myself, because I love the data and statistics, but also so I can give a kind of tangible representation of what can be achieved within a certain amount of time when it comes to language learning. Also, this just seems like a brilliant opportunity to track a language from the very beginning, so that I know that once I get to, say, 500 hours, I know exactly what I've achieved in that amount of time, and yeah, it'll be fun to look back on. So my approach is very flexible. I don't have any set approach. I tend to find that different approaches work for different languages, and also just my motivation at that point in time. So I'm very happy to try out new material. I'm happy to kind of focus on individual skills. Generally speaking, when it comes to language learning, I enjoy reading the most. So I will sometimes, probably in a kind of a very imbalanced way, will focus on reading and end up actually neglecting speaking to probably a larger extent that I actually like to. The mistake I have made in the past, though, is switching resources too readily. So I will start something, do a couple of chapters in a book, and then start a flashcard deck and chop and change pretty much willy-nilly. So what I want to do with this is stick to the resources that I start. So whether that be a Duolingo tree, a flashcard deck, a textbook, whatever it is, I want to at least see it through. So if I start a book, finish it. yeah, I've kind of ended up having stilted progress and losing motivation because I've done that too often. So that's the only real, I guess, kind of rule that I want to implement into this language challenge itself. If you know me in real life, and to the dismay of many a passerby, I carry my iPad around pretty much everywhere I go, in my hand, down the street. I pretty much exclusively at the moment use my iPad for language study, so whether that be websites on just a web browser or language apps. I pretty much don't take any notes in any kind of form. I used to take, or try and take, paper notes, but because I love stationery, I love the aesthetics of it, kind of formatting it, and it's fun. But I would get distracted. I would focus too much on the formatting and making it look pretty that it never actually became useful. So pretty much got rid of that, and I occasionally will take notes using the Note app, but it'll mainly just be screenshots. If I see something that I want to question later, grab a screenshot and then look back at it for reference. So not a lot of note taking, mainly just apps and that kind of stuff. The first resource I'm going to be using is Duolingo, and yes, I won't go into this too much now because I will make a separate video on Duolingo, but it does get a lot of bad press. I know some people have had personally bad experiences with it, or they've heard other people have found it ineffective, or it's not going to get you fluent, which is absolutely true, but for this particular purpose, I think it's going to work for me. I think it's great if you are a complete beginner, firstly. It helps if you have a basic understanding of grammar, and if you have an abundance of time. And time is the most important thing, I think, in my circumstance, and let me explain why. I view this as a matter of accuracy versus progress. Generally speaking, people do between maybe 5 minutes and half an hour a day of Duolingo. And at that point, you really have two choices: focus on accuracy or progress through the tree. So you can choose to advance through the tree quickly, but then you will have to sacrifice accuracy. Or you can be really, really strict and complete every level to 5 crowns, but your progress will be very, very slow, especially with this kind of 15-minute a day kind of rule set. This ends up being focus on progress equals low accuracy, or focus on accuracy equals slow progress. But I believe this can be remedied pretty much just through time. And if you apply an abundance of time, you equal progress plus accuracy. So you get the best of both worlds. So considering I have up to 40 hours to apply per week, I think I'll be fine in that respect. Duolingo is self-contained, and what I mean by that is it covers all 4 skills. So reading, writing, speaking, and listening, obviously to varying extents, and yes, it has its shortcomings, but technically it does cover all those 4 skill sets. Also, everything you learn it builds on what it teaches you. So what you learn in lesson 5 is based on what you've studied in lessons 1 through to 4. So that's really helpful because you don't really need flashcards, at least at this stage, because the vocabulary and the sentence structure is drilled. There's a lot of repetition, and I think that's very, very good for at least kind of solidifying things in your mind. I'm pretty much using Duolingo as a replacement for a beginner textbook. Beginner textbooks can be good, but I find them a bit dry. I used to love them, but the main reason for that is the lack of exercises. Most books, each chapter maybe you have 20 to 30 exercises, if you're lucky. And at that point, it's good for comprehension and understanding. Brilliant for that because the explanation is usually quite comprehensive. But there's no practice, and either that's a case of finding a workbook or looking up exercises elsewhere, and that becomes a bit of a mess. I want to keep this tight and efficient, and I don't want to be browsing the web searching for resources too much. So in that respect, I find it just convenient. So out of my 40 hours, I spent 38 hours and 54 minutes on Duolingo, and that does sound a lot, but that will change in coming weeks. It won't just be lots of Duolingo. But what I aim to do is get each skill to 5 crowns. So as I said before, I want to get accuracy and progress, so definitely wanted to actually fully 5 crown it just to, again, solidify everything that I was actually learning. What I would do is do 3 crowns, and then progress maybe 3 or 4 lessons and then retrace my steps and finish those up to 5. So the progress was relatively slow due to that, but again, progress was made through just sheer amount of time. I found with each lesson there was definitely a kind of motivation curve. At the beginning of the lesson, really motivated because it's something new and a bit more interesting. Get to around about 3 crowns and it got a bit repetitive and tedious. And then at the end, because I knew that it was actually sticking and working, motivation went back up. So kind of pros and cons. But I definitely wouldn't want to be doing this again for another week, like lots and lots of Duolingo. But it was fun. So I still want to finish the tree though. One of the last lessons I studied was conjunctions. And I could see that coming up for a while, and I was really looking forward to that. I really wanted to learn the word for but and because that just opens up so many possibilities and gets you out of just making statement after statement. And it's those kind of small victories that are really worth it. Sounds relatively insignificant, but yeah, it opens up a world of possibilities, so yeah, that was good fun. Duolingo's definitely improved a lot since the last time I used it. The tips section that actually have some kind of grammar or vocabulary explanation was really useful. Again, I don't find this a lot different to a beginner textbook in terms of how in depth it went. There were a few things towards the later lessons I did that were why they weren't very clear, so that's not brilliant. But overall, I think it's enough based on how many exercises there are. So most of it I'm learning through doing it anyway. I'm not taking notes or anything like that. So I managed to get to the level 3 milestone, so I'm happy with my progress, but I honestly thought I'd probably get further, but progress definitely slowed down as I went on. Breezed through the level 1, and then levels 2 got slower, and then in turn level 3 a little bit slower again. So it is actually getting more complicated, but yeah, no complaints really. So the second resource I used was Link. Now Link is a kind of assisted language reader, so you grade the words based on how well you know it and it will color code it accordingly. I only did this after about 38 hours of Duolingo, and I know a lot of people say to read from the very, very beginning. I find this, for myself at least, pretty pointless. If I don't know any kind of sentence patterns or vocabulary, it's pretty much just all white noise. I find it too tedious to look at a page and know absolutely nothing, but going through the 38 hours, I feel as though I have enough where I can at least understand something and build upon that. So at this stage, I think I'm at a level where I can start reading, but I didn't want to rush into it. So I've started on the Link mini stories, and there are 60 of them. In Swedish, there were only 30 available, and once I got to 30, I moved on to newspapers that were aimed at kind of school children. So it's native level material, but still at a relatively low level. So I will be looking for that for German, the equivalent kind of resource for German, once I get to about that 30 lesson mark again. But like I said before, I want to complete material, so I do want to get through to finish the 60 mini stories as well. The reason why I like news as a resource is because there's new content every day. The level doesn't particularly change, but there's constant fresh content. I know Steve Kaufman, the creator of Link, he does the mini stories again and again and again. And I understand the benefit to that because you familiarize yourself with kind of sentence chunks and all that kind of stuff. But for me, that's a bit dry. I need to have a bit more fresh content, so I will move on as soon as possible, but definitely go back to them on occasion. But I find it becomes a bit like textbook dialogues where you've seen it again and it doesn't make reading enjoyable to me. So yeah, that's the main reason for that. So I did 1 hour and 7 minutes of Link, and in that time I did the first 3 mini stories. And I am so glad I did the Duolingo because for the most part everything was comprehensible. And that's really what I'm aiming for. So the articles, a few of the conjunctions, a decent amount of the vocabulary, but a lot of that was new. But yeah, like once I kind of assigned the grade to how well I knew each word and looked up the definitions of new words, I was happy. Relatively enjoyable. Like I said, I've done these particular stories before in Swedish, but fun nonetheless. There's not too much more to say about Link at this stage because I did so little of it, but I will be doing a lot more of that going forward. And hopefully I'll get to the point where reading is a sizable chunk of the 40 hours, but yeah, I have to be patient with that one. So why no passive immersion? And I think this one's pretty simple. My level is just not there yet. Once I have a better grasp of grammar and a broader vocabulary, fine. And I will incorporate it more and more as I go along through the 100, 200, 300 hours, but right now I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe incorporate it once I hit maybe towards the 80-hour mark, but right now, definitely not. I'll see how it goes, but definitely more of that in the future. Hallo und willkommen, ich heiße Ethan und ich komme aus England. Ich lerne Deutsch. Deutsch ist schwer, doch ich lerne gern und ich bin glücklich, wenn ich lerne Sprachen. Ich habe einen Bruder und eine Schwester. Sie sind wirklich toll. Ich habe auch eine Freundin. Sie ist wirklich schön. Ich habe viele Bücher und ich mag Katzen, denn sie sind süß. Auf Wiedersehen und bis später. So that's roughly what I can do at the moment. Don't be too harsh with your criticism. I know my pronunciation is far from perfect and my intonation is probably all over the place, but it's a work in progress. I'm not too fussed about being perfect at this stage. It's very early days and I need to be realistic with my progress. I'm just glad I've gone from nothing to something, so there's that, and there should be improvement coming in the future, so we'll see. So in terms of improvement, I have technically improved 100%. I've gone from absolutely nothing to something. So yeah, absolute beginner to beginner. And I'm happy with my progress. I thought I'd actually cover more than I did in the Duolingo tree. But like I said, I was going for accuracy, but I think it's just surprising how quickly time adds up. Even though it sounds like a lot, realistically you can't get a ridiculous amount done. But definitely worth it, and if I keep going with this, then my progress should be quick. But for the moment, there's nothing to compare it to because this is the first 40 hours, so going forward it'll be easier to kind of compare progress week to week, but nothing really more to say on that at this stage. In terms of difficulties, I think the main one was obviously the time, and it sounds pretty obvious because the challenge is doing 40 hours, it's supposed to be a long amount of time. But for me, it was more the time management. If you break down the 7 days with the 40 hours, it gets you to, I think, 5 hours and 43 minutes. So my aim was to do 6 hours per day and pace it like that. So I was always slightly ahead of the record, the kind of the optimal pace. And it started off well, but I quickly fell behind. So on day one, I managed to do 6 hours and 13 minutes, which put me about 13 minutes ahead of pace. And I was pretty confident and just thought, this isn't so bad. Day two, I did 4 hours and 26 minutes, and this left me 47 minutes behind where I probably should be. But I thought, I'll be fine, I will just catch up tomorrow. I did 4 hours and 32 minutes the next day, and it pretty much stayed at that pace. So for the next 2 days, just over 4.5 hours. Day 6, I was pretty much back on pace. I did just over 5.5 hours, which I should have been doing each day. But that did mean that I was 4 hours and 16 minutes behind. So that meant for the last day, I'd only done 30 hours. So I had 10 whole hours to do on the last day. And I definitely don't want to be doing that again. I need to manage my time better. I did it in the end, but I was mentally tired, and by the end of it, I didn't really want to do it until I got to about the 38-hour mark, and then I did some Link. Bit of a change of pace, but I need to manage my time better next week because that was not a good feeling. And 6 hours is enough. 10 hours, I don't really want to be doing that too often. So my L1 is English, and I've also studied Japanese and also a bit of Korean. And within them, they're not gendered languages. I've recently studied some Swedish, and they do have genders, but in German, they have genders. So they only have 3 genders, yes, but they are important for absolutely everything. So the gender will impact the definite and indefinite articles. They will impact pronouns. They'll impact verbs. And this is tough. So it's essentially just when you learn a noun, learn it with the gender. And I found that out very, very quickly because pretty much all of my mistakes didn't come from just, oh, I'm putting it in the wrong word order, or I don't remember the word. Remember the word, but didn't necessarily remember the gender. So going forward, whenever I do learn from flashcards, I need to make sure they actually have which gender they are as well. So a fun learning experience, and you do get into the groove of it. It's just frustrating when that's your only mistake. But I enjoy kind of rote memorization anyway, so I guess it goes hand in hand with that. I think learning the plurals are also very important. I would argue not quite as important as remembering the gender, but I think there's supposed to be some kind of pattern for the plural forms, but it seems a bit all over the place to me at this stage anyway. So firstly, gender, and then plurals is also a decent thing to try and remember as well. But yeah, so plans for hours 40 through to 80. At least semi-long term, I do want to complete the Duolingo tree, so we'll be carrying on doing that. The 2 main reasons is what I said earlier about Duolingo. I think it works well for kind of how the stage I'm at with my language. But also I do want to make a kind of a video on that, going over what I actually think of it. I don't want to either praise it based on limited data or condemn it based on limited data. So I want to be as fair as possible as I can with it. So there's that reason, and Link definitely will carry on with it. I want to do a lot more with that. If I can, I want to get to the number 30 in the mini stories so that I can move on to stuff the following week, but we'll see how that goes. Again, I'm in no rush. I've got lots of time to dedicate to this. And possibly I'll introduce Memrise. Mainly to break things up a little bit. I don't mind doing 3 resources. I don't really want to do any more than that, but I might start doing Memrise towards the later stages of next week, just to get the ball rolling, because I enjoy Memrise, so. But we'll see. So in summary, I really enjoyed this week. I'm really glad I got the ball rolling with German. It's been a long time coming, and yeah, I've put it off for far, far too long. But thank you to Days of French and Swedish, Seabolt Speaks, and Language Come Up for inspiring me to actually start doing this. And yeah, immediately as soon as I saw that challenge, I knew I had to be part of it, but yeah. So this video was a bit long because I did feel as though I wanted to go over the kind of logistics and kind of background of what I'm actually, I guess my thinking behind what I'm doing. Next week will probably be a bit more focused on the study itself and kind of outcomes, difficulties, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the format will hopefully progress as I go along. But thank you for watching, and if you did make it this far in the video, thank you even more. But yeah, feel free to subscribe, of course, but also leave any comments that you want in the comment section below. I'd like to hear what you have to say, what you thought of how I'm approaching this, and obviously any feedback, advice, or just conversation. But yeah, hopefully see you next week, and yeah, bye for now.